What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Whiskey Morgue podcast, where we talk about the whiskey we're drinking and the horror we're watching. I'm your host, Mike, and tonight I am joined by Jazz Weaver. She is the national brand ambassador for the Bardstown Bourbon Company, amongst many other things, but we'll get into that. Jazz, how are you doing tonight? Thank you so much for having drinks with me.
Oh my gosh, I'm doing fantastic and I am thrilled to be here. I get to do a lot of podcasts, but usually they are 100% whiskey focused, so I'm excited to chat about some other stuff too.
Perfect. I wanted to talk about that because it was funny how we connected, and I think, it's a little bit about like the enthusiasm that I think it was our mutual friend Maddie, where I posted something and tagged her, and somehow you'd seen it, and you were like, "Wait, is this a bourbon and horror like account or podcast?" You're like, "Count me in." And on the spot, I just remember getting the message and being like, "Yes, like this is like the response that I want." So we immediately agreed that we were gonna do this, and I'm so glad that we found the time. And then what got even better is so now we had to do the waiting game. You're very busy. We'll get into like your roles, and you're all over the place. But as you know, the anticipation's building, and we're gonna lead up to this podcast. I start getting messages from you and my friend Graham Rowett from the No Sleep podcast or the United States of Bourbon and his project he has going on there. Um, so if you're unfamiliar, yeah, the No Sleep podcast, one of my favorites. I'm gonna sit down with those guys soon and talk about their like bourbon project. But the caption was like, Graham was like, "Yeah, I'm just here with Jazz talking about werewolves." And and he's like, I heard she's going to be on the podcast, and you had messaged me too, and you're like, small world. And I thought that was so cool because when I started this, I thought it's way too niche. Like I'm going to do it to entertain myself. But then just kind of seeing everything come together and like mutual friends online and how you connected with them, I thought that was just such a cool moment. But how was that hanging out with those guys? And for yourself, I know you're a horror fan, so it must have been really cool to do as well.
That was an absolute blast. I got to tour them around the distillery, and there were just so many little moments of like, oh, we have more in common than we thought. Like Brandon showed up wearing a hoodie and I was like, "Oh, that game is on my Steam like wish list." And he was like, "Oh, I just happened to compose the music for that." So, I was like, "Dang, that's crazy." And then Mitch is also part of the United States of Bourbon, and as soon as he walked in, I was like, "That man draws Batman comics." So it was they were really psyched to be at the distillery, but I was
Yeah.
really hyped to like be meeting them. So it was a cool experience.
They really are like the all-star team. Like when I found out who was behind it, and again, first it was like the No Sleep guys, and I'm like, oh, you just have one of like the greatest artists as well as part of your group. Like I was just like, this is really the coolest thing ever that they had this going. But the mention was the discussion of werewolves. How did that come up amongst you guys and your love for werewolves? Do you remember?
I'm gonna be honest, I do not remember how werewolves came up in that setting, but I am a werewolf girly, and it started like way back in probably middle school. I read a book called Blood and Chocolate, and it was about a werewolf girl who had a crush on a human boy. And after that, I was like, any werewolf content that I can find, I'm all about it. Um, and
I
so
know you're
yeah, maybe it was the alliteration, werewolves and whiskey, and we were just off and going.
you're gonna do like the side account, werewolves and whiskey. That's gonna be the side project. Will be all like
You know
affiliated.
what? Now that you've said it, we've maybe spoken into existence.
And I know you were recently in LA, and there was the museum there, and I saw like the Rick Baker busts of
Oh my
American Werewolf in
gosh.
London, which was amazing.
It was so cool. So it was the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, and they had a whole exhibit to kind of special effects, movie features, and they had so there was the mechanism that went under the mask that was kind of like pushing it forward. Then they had the sculpt that they put the air bladders under to kind of make it look like the skin was pulsing.
Wow.
And then on the wall next to it, they were playing the clip from the movie where that like transformation happens. And it was just so neat to be able to watch it and then to look at the pieces and be like, okay, I see how this fits together. I see how that movie magic happened.
That's cool. From what I gathered from it, maybe I have to go back and visit it. I was like, it's just cool if this is the bust like from the film, but I had no clue that it was actually the different components of the special effects, and it was to show how that was made. That is amazing.
Oh, it was so neat. I was geeking out in there.
Um, So back to like, okay, so you toured the No Sleep Guys, and like I want to talk about your title because National Brand Ambassador. Like you and I have chatted in short, building up to this. But in the meantime, I'd seen you like all over the place. Like you're at the distillery, you're touring those guys, United States of Bourbon, then you're somewhere else, and then you're in LA. And so like, what is your role, I guess? Because I feel like you wear many
So
different hats and do many different things.
I like to jokingly say that I'm a jazz of all trades. I've gotten really lucky because when I hired into this role, there had only been one brand ambassador for Bardstown before, and they were essentially like, this is wet cement. You can kind of shape your own path, and whatever you're good at, what we're going to lean into. My main purpose is just spreading the good word of Bardstown. So that involves traveling to talk about it because I have that firsthand distillery experience. But I really lean into sensory experiences, so teaching people how to smell what they taste, taste what they smell, and put a vocabulary to it. And then I come from a bartending background, so that Bardstown found me running bar programs in Metro Detroit. So I'm also always thinking about cocktails and what's mixable, but how do you pair food with beverage and also flavor with fragrance. Um, but I've been really lucky because, like I said, they let me do so many things. I feel like there's
Yeah.
almost never a no in my future or my past, really. If I'm like, hey, I want to teach a class at the distillery, they're like, go for it. I've gotten to draw art for some of our menus. I have been a hand model for some of our photo shoots or done like cocktail styling for some of our photo shoots. I feel like any way that I'm like, hey, I'd like to apply myself, they're like,
Yeah.
go for it, which is really cool, to be in a position where one, they believe in my talent no matter how I want to apply it, but two, that they're so willing to let me like learn and grow and just kind of be flexible.
It feels like there's so much more room there for a creative, like working there like yourself, and just kind of like, yeah, you have a role, but it's very loose in how that's defined and kind of honoring what you want to do. And it just several people I've met who began working for Bardstown all speak very highly of it. And I think it's not even just part of the job when they speak about their experience working there. You could tell they kind of like really champion the brand, like embody the ethos, and maybe that's because they honor the people who work there as individuals and creatives. So I think that's really cool that you get to do all those different things and exercise your creativity.
Yeah, it has sincerely been a blast, especially because one, so much of the staff is great. There are so many people on the team that if I had met them independently of work, I would still want to know them. Like
Yeah.
they're some of my best friends right now are people that I've met through the company, which I think just kind of speaks to the caliber and quality of people that they're hiring.
Um, I think we should have a pour because I think like you and
Oh,
I are going to be
yeah.
chatting. We both will talk all night, and I appreciate that. And I think no better time than you said we were going to start off with the Bardstown Origin series. Yes, it's right here. I have the.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for sending this. Like I said, before we jumped on here, I was saying I've tried a whole bunch of Bardstown expressions. I have some other collaborations, but I have not tried the two we're drinking tonight, which is this one here. The Origin series is like the weeded that everyone's going crazy about, and I need to now try it. And then I guess this was the most recent collaboration, the Amrut. Um,
So it's actually not my most recent, but it's one of my coolest.
okay.
But no spoilers, we're gonna get
Yeah.
there.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, if you want to kind of just introduce what is the Bardstown origin and in this particular bottle, and then we'll dive into it and have a taste and chat about it, and we'll get into some more horror talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bardstown does three things really well. We make our own whiskey, we blend, and we play well with others. And I think between the two of these bottles, we're going to get into all those things. But the Origin series is essentially our mainstay all day. You should be able to go to your local liquor store and find them any time of the year. Uh, Anytime a Bardstown label says Origin on it, it means that it is 6 years old, 100% estate distilled. So we are getting the grain, milling it, cooking it, fermenting, distilling, barreling, aging, and then bottling and labeling it ourselves.
Wow.
Um, the Origin series is we've got four of them. So a high rye Kentucky straight bourbon, a wheated bottled and bond, a cherry finished rye, and then this is the most recent one, and it's the high wheat. So 39% wheat in the mash bill, 53% corn, 8% malted barley, 106 proof. And I think we'll pause there so we can
Yeah,
try it,
yeah. I'm gonna take a sip. I don't have a Bardstown Glen. I have a Green River, but it'll work.
which is fantastic because that's our sister distillery.
Yeah,
So
there we go. All right. This is so good. The,
yay.
it's I get like everything that goes into like baking like a chocolate chip cookie. It's like you get like the vanilla, brown sugar, there's like a bit of maple, like milk chocolate and like a hint of cinnamon. And what's crazy is for the proof, it actually drinks, and this is not a bad thing. It's like it's not super hot. It's very like buttery. And yeah, this I can see why this is like, we were kind of joking about Graham beforehand telling me to grab a few of these bottles, and I can see why, and I can see why they can be killed off quite fast.
So I am really delighted with the way that you chose to describe this pour. All the things that go into a chocolate chip cookie, like that covers so many notes. I think that this is a really bright pour. I get a little bit of citrus off of it too, but
Mhm.
you absolutely nailed it with what you mentioned. And I agree about it being a higher proof, but still kind of an easy drinker. I think that well, one, I'm a sucker for weeded whiskey,
Mhm.
and I like when it's got a higher proof because then it's sturdy, it stands up in a cocktail. A lot of the time, wheat's very soft, so it can get lost in some of those classic boozy sippers. But this is also a unique bottle for us because it's one of our lower barrel entry proofs.
Oh, okay.
The other origins go in at 120. This one goes in at 108. And we did that specifically for the mouthfeel. You mentioned that butteriness, and yeah,
Yeah.
like the lower barrel entry proof tends to give you a little more fatty acid. So like that mouth coating, like really rich, like feeling.
It's cool because sometimes we doubt ourselves, or at least I doubt myself. Like I love sensory. I pick up on notes and mouthfeel, and yeah, it came off as very buttery. And then to find out that it goes in at a lower proof, and this was kind of intentional. I'll give myself the small pat on the back for that one because
Yeah.
it's so cool that it stands out. Now, I had a question for you because one of the other bottles I have, and I brought it with me. By brought it, I mean took it from the house to the garage where I record. Is the black label. And originally, like before this came out, a friend of mine, I guess, had gotten word or saw it at the store, and I wasn't aware. And he's like, "Hey, do you have like the Bardstown Origin series, like the weeded one?" I said, "Yeah, man, I have that one. It's like the black label." And he's like, "No, it's not the black label." So is like, will this still be on shelves? Is this still a thing, or has it been transitioned
Yes.
to the just like this new one?
Oh no, that'll still be on shelves. So that's my other weeder, but that one's a bottled in bond, so 100 proof. That bottle, actually the first recipe that ever ran on our stills, and it's a mash bill that was crafted by Steve Nally. So Steve, number one employee that we hired, first guy on the staff,
Yeah, of
but also known as the Wheat King of Kentucky because of his time at Maker's Mark. So
course.
kind of neat to have that in the portfolio as well. But actually, I love that you brought that bottle up because while that mash bill is Steve's, this mash bill is Nick Smith's, and he is our head distiller. So those
Cool.
are two of the minds and palates that go into making our whiskey. And I think a great example of how different a mash bill can present. And fun fact, that bottle is actually my favorite of the four Origin series.
That's
So,
really cool. And you mentioned the bartending background. And I just did an interview with Nick from Barrel, their master blender, and she had
oh,
a
cool.
background in building cocktails and cocktail menus. And I just think how I can see in speaking to her about it, like I could see how it translates to understanding whiskey. I mean, first of all, you guys are at the front of the line in terms of using these bottles in crafting these cocktails, but you even mentioned like standing up in a cocktail and it being able to still like shine while layering all these flavors. So it totally makes sense now, kind of like how you were poached for this position in terms of really understanding A, all the sensory stuff, but then B, like how do we play with this now, and what does this look like when you put it in a cocktail?
Oh yeah. At first, I was really nervous to take a distillery job because I really loved bartending, and I felt like there was still so much more I wanted to do in that avenue.
Hmm.
But my main concern was, well, if you're only using one spirit, how exciting is it going to be to build cocktails now?
Yeah.
And I feel like I got really lucky because each Bardstown expression is just so very much its own that each new bottle, I'm like, oh, there are still tons of flavors to play with here. So it's kept me on my toes, and it continues to be exciting.
Yeah, and as a consumer for myself, like I was already really hyped up about collaborations and what they were blending because I know like blending has really grown in the industry, and I think people are recognizing how you can build, and when you have all these like different barrels, and Bardstown has a strong library of different barrels you can play with. But then I thought it was so cool that they were just kind of sitting and waiting and putting out these releases, and all of a sudden hit the market with like 6 year products that are super affordable and amazing. And I think that just completely disrupted like the whole bourbon game because, we talk about the heritage distilleries and they have their place. And I feel like Bardstown is straddling it's as craft can be really, but at the same time now in a place that they kind of bought themselves time, put out amazing releases, and now can put out something like the Origin series that is on shelf and accessible and absolutely amazing.
Well, thank you. You're confirming that our strategy is working. Um, while we were waiting for the juice that we were making ourselves to be old enough to bottle, we really wanted to demonstrate, like, hey, we know what a good whiskey is and what it tastes like. So we tried to show that through blending. We tried to show that through barrel finishing. And then at the point when everyone was like, your bottles are kind of expensive, we were able to show up and say, hey, we also make our own and they're affordable enough for your home back bar.
Yeah, that it's you've really covered everything, and it's nice to like the origin. So the bottle that we're sipping tonight, I think retails between like what, like $55 and $60, I believe, depending on what market or what store it's
Yeah,
at.
I would say 45 to 60 depending on where you're
Yeah,
at.
and this is like it's a like if I was entertaining, I always talk about the entertaining bottle is the most important because I joke that when people are going to come by my house, they're going to look at my mass collection of bottles and be like, I've always wanted to try that rare bottle up there. And most times people are just like, you're crazy. You have way too many whiskey bottles, but they want something on the table. And we people joke, and like whiskey nerds will joke about like, oh, I brought out the bottle and it was mixed with Coke, or someone put like a ton of ice in it. And I'm all for like drink it how you like it, but this is a perfect bottle to put on the table while entertaining or hosting a Halloween party or horror party. Because like yeah, you don't care. Like at like 40, even upwards of $60, it's so good that I can sip it and enjoy it. I can maybe have some fun with it, put in a cocktail, or if someone's dumping a bunch of Coke into it, you don't care because it's phenomenal anyway. So and at a really decent price.
Right. Oh my gosh, thank you. I
So I wanted to talk about the pairing. So you coming on here, I kind of gave you the heads up, like we got to do the whiskey pairings. All right. So I wanted to know if you wanted to lead with a pairing or you want me to go first. It's totally up to you.
so for this bottle, not necessarily a werewolf movie, but I think Trick or Treat. It does have werewolves in it,
It does.
but I paired these bottles up or this bottle with that movie because I think it isn't quite what you expect, but it still hits all the requisites. And I feel that way about both the pour and that movie.
That is like spot on. When I put people on the spot to do like these pairings or find a parallel, sometimes I'm almost like, oh, like am I making them uncomfortable? Is it too pushy? And then you come on here and just have this like perfect angle for it. I thought the same. So I went werewolves as well, just to honor your love for werewolves coming into here. So I went
Thank
with
you.
Silver Bullet. Um,
Oh yeah.
and for me, it's like when, Silver Bullet, and it actually works perfect now that I know what this tastes like. But like when I think of weeded bourbons, I think of like comfort. It's just like familiar, and usually it's like a little bit more of like subdued spice. It's sweeter and makes me think of like a lot of home baked things. And even in my house, I use a lot of like weeded bourbon for like vanilla as well, baking and whatnot. And I think that movie is just like cozy horror nostalgia. You got like bike riding and summer adventures, and it's like you see like the small town, like quaint neighborhood, and to me, it's just like it's comfort all around. It's my comfort watch. It just exudes comfort, like the whole setting and everything that's fun about it. So I think this perfectly lines up in terms of like being a like the comfort pour or the chocolate chip
So
cookie while you're watching a movie.
the funny thing is that all day long I waffled back and forth between the movie I wanted to choose and Silver Bullet was the other one I was considering.
There, that's amazing.
What a surprise and a delight. That's cool.
Yeah, great minds. Because I was like, you know what? Like I like putting like some parameters sometimes. So I was like, the challenge is that like I know Jazz loves werewolves, so like let's keep it in that like subgenre of like werewolf movies. But yeah, Silver Bullet to me is just a comfort watch. It's such a fun one, and this is definitely a fun bourbon. Um, Before we go into the second tasting, we need to address something. So you're from Detroit. I know it sounds very serious, right? We need to address something.
Yeah, right.
Start.
I like to say Metro Detroit. So I have worked in the city, but the place I was living most recently is Ferndale, which is like 15 minutes away. So I don't want anybody to be like, "Pff, she's not from
Okay.
Detroit."
Well, yeah, and I mean like it's kind of like I do the same. I say I'm from Toronto, but I'm like 40 minutes outside of Toronto. So like there's like, a decent drive there. But I'm somewhat familiar with Detroit. I like, it's a 4-hour drive. I think a lot of cool things are happening in the city. And so, I've been to concerts at is Royal Oaks.
Oh
Is a
yeah.
Royal Yeah, so Royal Oaks, gone down there to the venue a couple times to see shows. So yeah, I'm kind of been in and around the outskirts of the city, but a couple like Detroit housekeeping questions of being Detroit. Um, why was Val's Pizza the best in Detroit?
Oh my gosh. I absolutely agree with that. And okay, fun fact. The place that Bardstown found me at was a spot called Frame. We would do monthly rotating menus on one side with visiting chefs. So
Mhm.
one month Val's Pizza came in and did a full month, so I got to write a menu to their pizzas.
That's
And
amazing.
they're really nice people. They're really cool people.
That's so
But
cool.
you're absolutely right.
I knew
Val's
you were a
Pizza
fan,
was
but that's so cool that you got to write the menu to that. Um, the other question is, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly. I should because in Canada the second language is French, but God knows if I can get by in a conversation. But who is Le Nain Rouge?
oh, fun. So he's essentially this little red dwarf, and there is always a I almost describe it as a Detroit Mardi Gras because there's a parade, you are encouraged to dress up. You're essentially chasing the bad luck out of the city for the year. But Detroit does have its own little cruise, so there are people in costumes, there are little floats. It's a really fun experience. I actually flew back a couple weeks ago specifically to go to that. And if if anybody's looking online and they look up Nain Rouge and they see a rat king, so a bunch of people in a rat costume with their tails all tied together, those are some of my best friends.
That's awesome. When I saw this pop up when I was looking at like some spooky tradition in Detroit, I thought it would be maybe like naturally tied to like Halloween time or fall, and I saw that it happens like kind of beginning of spring. And I don't know if that's intentional, but I was like, yo, how like Detroit does their own Halloween in the springtime. I'm like, this is amazing.
Totally. Another cool thing that Detroit, I want to say has, but maybe at this point it's used to have,
Yeah,
is Theater Bazaar. So it was, I want to say, North America's largest masquerade party, Halloween party.
yeah.
Took over the Masonic Temple, and it was just 8 floors of absolute immersion. So before I got this job, I was a go-go demon for that for like 10 years.
My
Uh,
third question was, what is Theater Bizarre?
oh, dude, okay, we are vibing hard tonight.
Yeah. And I was gonna, and my
Yeah.
the attachment question to that, why do we hail Zombo?
So you like it's something I really encourage like just checking out the art for. There's a man, his name is John Donovan, and he essentially created this Halloween party, and the only way that I can describe it is just immersive. And so it's got its own lore and its own characters. There are just a ton of volunteers that show up to make it happen, and I mean, any direction that you could think, they are doing it. So there are acrobats, there are burlesque dancers, there are go-go demons. But then you've also got singers, and they're the people who make the stages. Like it is just the this incredible explosion of Detroit creativity and collaboration and spookiness.
I love just the idea of all those things coming together, right? That it's more than just like, yeah, okay, if you're a horror fanatic or you love everything spooky, but like it's creatives again, kind of collaborating, creating this lore and I've been to the Masonic Temple for a couple concerts. But I've always wanted to like just explore the building more. Like the venue is beautiful, it's really cool and it's rich in history, obviously. But the fact that you're like talking about this party takes over different floors of that building would just be so incredible to see.
Oh yeah, and I mean when I say that they are leaning on immersion, it's like they're switching out all the lights to like red gels, or that there are some colors that are just not part of the party at all. Like there is nothing in the decor or the character designs that you'll see that'll be blue. Like
Mm.
I'm talking like really like detail oriented work. And it's cool. It was I would say just a huge part of my Halloween in October for essentially the entire time that I've been living in the Metro Detroit area.
That's
And
cool.
I'm pretty sure the Masonic has booked some concerts during the time when it normally would happen. So they're kind of in limbo of like where what can fit and still be like true to what they've been building. But
Yeah.
I know that this year they're doing like a May the 4th be with you type of, well, it's called Space Dive, and it
Okay.
is an immersive like Star Wars party.
That's
And they've done
cool.
that for a couple of years, but I feel like anything that that group touches is just creative gold.
Yeah, I mean, and you can, and the attention to detail and what you're talking about, and just kind of like working through all that stuff. It's definitely been added to my list in terms of things that I'd love to go out there and experience. I already love Detroit, again, but kind of still as like an outsider, just going to some of the more typical places or going for a concert. But these things are definitely on my radar now, thanks to you. So I'm glad that we're doing this. But on the note of
Cool.
collaboration, I think this is a great segue. We'll get into
Perfect.
our second pour, right? Collaboration. So if you want to explain a little bit about this one. So I thought it was the most recent, but I guess it's not. But either way, it's your favorite, and that's what matters here. And I'm super pumped because I know a little bit about like Indian single malts, and I've kind of tasted a little bit of everything. So I'm super excited to taste this one.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start by saying Bardstown loves to collaborate. We do everything with three core tenets. I feel like any podcast I'm ever on, you'll hear me saying these three words. We want to be innovative, collaborative, and transparent. Um, this is all three. So we take five specifically selected whiskeys ranging between 8 and 14 years old. Two of them get rested in Indian single malt casks for 18 months, and then we blend in the other three. Uh, and I just think it's such a neat thing. So it's bridging East and West. It's kind of playing around with flavors. The Amrut distillery located in Bangalore, India, and they are pioneers of the Indian single malt. They've been around since 1948. Is that real? Yes, 1948.
Yeah.
Um, and this is the first time in whiskey history that American whiskey has been aged in Indian single malt casks. Um, so we started with two Indiana ryes, an 8 year and a 9 year. Those got rested for 18 months, and then we blended in three Kentucky bourbons. Um, One of the cool things about the way we finish is that we really encourage people to get the barrels to us as wet as possible. A lot of the
Mhm.
time when you're finishing, you're dumping the barrel, you're rinsing it, you're sending it whenever. We're requesting that they dump it, they pump it full of argon gas to kind of displace all the oxygen, saran wrap it, get it in refrigerated storage, and get it to us as soon as possible. Um, and yeah, because of that, I think this has like a little bit of like gentle campfire left over from that Indian single malt.
I just
It's
nosed
110 proof.
I just nosed a bit of it, and right away I got a little bit of that like char and smoke. Yeah, for sure.
No, totally.
And the proof on this is I think I have it here
It,
too.
it's 110.
110. Very cool. This is what I love about Bardstown is that like you could just run with doing, Origin series or Disco. Like people love the Discovery series. They're usually it's a lot of like mostly Kentucky, sometimes Indiana, but everyone's very familiar, right? It's kind of a safe place and everyone speculates where it came from. And I love when people go crazy about those
Oh
mash
yeah.
bills and whatnot. But for me, like I do drink other things other than bourbon. I do love single malts, whether it be from American single malts or Scotch, or Indian single malts. Like I personally enjoy just the wide spectrum of flavors. When it comes to like a whiskey, I never discriminate. I always give it a shot and try it. And I have tried a few different Indian single malts and some from Amrut. So when I saw this project come out, I thought it was so cool, but very bold as well, because like if Bardstown has this like loyal fan base, like oh they have all this like Kentucky and Indiana stuff, to then dump it into barrels from the east and decide to finish it and kind of bring on these air characteristics from Indian single malt. I just think it's very bold, it's progressive, it is innovative, like you said, and I just really commend them for kind of always pushing the boundaries because this might be like the gateway into how did that influence like the great ryes and bourbons that I enjoy, and I'm picking up on these subtle notes. Maybe I'll explore that later on. I think that's just the coolest thing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think that we describe ourselves as the modern bourbon experience, and part of being modern is being willing to explore. Um, and I think that we make a lot of bottles that encourage people to kind of step outside of their comfort zone or like their common mash bills. Like our rye gets finished in infrared toasted cherry oak barrels,
Mhm.
which it makes it so that if you like rye, you're like, oh, that's a neat finish on a rye. If you hate rye, it's a lot softer and less spicy and more botanical. So it's like that baby step into the rye category. Like I myself, I don't love rye. So when I
Yeah.
first had ours and I was like, I don't hate this. And then I was able to find other ryes that were not like that big, like peppery, like slap in the face.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense because yeah, like rye is kind of could be divisive because if someone's just had like a straight 95.5 rye and yeah, it's very minty and spicy, I could see how easily someone's like, yeah, I'm not a fan compared to like, drinking like wheated bourbon. But then having like the cherry it's infrared, you said it's like infrared
Yeah.
that's so cool, and I can see how that would like soften and round out all these flavors in there. Before we continue, I want to take a sip of this because I'm excited. The
Yeah.
nose is
Yeah.
the
Get in
nose is
there.
incredible. The nose is incredible. I've just been like sticking my nose in here while we chat. Wow, that's so unique
Right?
as
I
it's
think,
intended to and should be, I guess. But it's very like it's unique, but it's familiar. Like I can taste the foundation and what's there. So I like we talked about like bridging it, but like. There's just so much going on. I'll let you kind of lead a little bit about like what's intended. I'll kind of tell you what I'm pulling from this, but this is in the
oh
meantime, I'll just
no,
keep
totally.
drinking.
I I do think that there is a little bit of that like gentle smoke. The barrels that we received were their fusion barrels, so it was some peated, some unpeated. Um,
Mhm.
but I also get like I get a little clove, I get a little black tea, I get
I mentioned like stone fruit. Definitely
yeah,
like
stone
stone
fruit for
fruit.
sure.
Yeah, the black tea that you're mentioning, I definitely pick up like this like herbal black tea. There's like this depth, and I guess what's funny because like you even mentioned like smoke or peat. I think that's another like these like red flag words for some people, or it can be like really divisive. And I'm like, it's not like I enjoy some peated scotch too, time to time. It's not that at all. It's like these like nice soft little like whispers of smoke. Campfire, what you mentioned in the nose, kind of
Oh
goes
yeah.
throughout. Like I just think of like charred like barbecuing, and then like sometimes you'll have some fun and char certain fruits and stuff. I just think like stone fruits and char, and it's delicious. This is so good.
I think that yeah, the smokiness aspect like for me it's like, oh, someone put a match out in here recently versus like a burning tire, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I like that. The match, the blowing out of a match is like the perfect way to describe it. Um, so if you have like, you've done tastings, you've done a ton of different events, a pour like this, how do you kind of win over the whiskey skeptic? Like, is this one that you find that maybe someone avoids at first, who's like the average bourbon drinker, and then you kind of win them over and slide it in there?
I think that, I mean, there are a couple ways that I approach it. One, if somebody's like, yeah, I hate this pour, then I'm like, oh, cool. You're probably gonna like whatever we make next then, because it's gonna be
Yeah.
100% different. Um, but two, I try to make like if someone's expressing to me that they really dislike a pour, I try to get them to pinpoint what it is that they are hating about it
Mm,
because I think that that helps them kind of define their palate and make more intelligent drinking choices in the future. So it's like, do you not like the mouthfeel? Do you not like the smoke? Or what do you like? You wish it was sweeter? Because I mean, at the end of the day, three Kentucky bourbons went into this, so
yeah.
there's a base that you like.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we just got to figure out like what that sticking point is.
Yeah, I think it's so easy. It's cool that you kind of pinpointed that, and you kind of walk through people in that experience because it's so easy to be like, why? Yeah, I don't like a pour, but it's like reading something, right? Like, well, you read a piece, you read a piece of poetry or a story, and you're like, cool, like you dislike it, but why? And like maybe you like this element, but not this, so go read something else there. I'm an English major. I know you're an English major too, so I'm just gonna go into
Yes.
I just gotta go into English analogies. But no, it's like you know to just simply say you hate a story or you hate the experience of drinking the whiskey. You know, it's pinpointing, yeah, what is it that you liked and didn't like, and then yeah, you can make an informed decision, which I think is really cool, and that's why you got hired to do what you do, and put in that role.
My favorite thing to do as a bartender was bully people into drinking gin. So often people would be like, I hate gin, it's not for me. And I would always be like, well, hang on. Because I find that a lot of the time people hated juniper specifically. And it's
Yes,
like there are a ton of gins that aren't juniper forward. Like my favorite, Liberator, it's super baking spice forward.
yes.
Or like Uncle Val's botanical gin, like that's a whole other like kind of category. So anytime someone's like, "Oh, I don't drink that at all," it's like, "No, you're gonna drink it tonight." I assure you, I'm gonna find a bottle that you enjoy,
Yeah.
and I kind of feel that way with the whiskey too. Like so often, people are like, "No, I never drink rye," and it's like, "But you never had my rye, so we got to try it."
There's a little bit of that challenge there. And I will say, like, it's funny you mentioned gin because for someone who's like so open about trying different whiskeys, I was the same. Like, I was very hypocritical in the sense that, like, what I preach about whiskey, I didn't say the same with gin. Like, I would be like, yeah, it tastes like Christmas tree, the whole juniper. And I guess it was through whiskey and different distilleries showing me, like, if they were doing gin as well. I was like, oh wow, like first of all, like, oh, this is like, you know, less juniper forward, or this is finished in a bourbon barrel. And these were like gateways for me to even in to delve into different types of gin, something that I had written off because again, it was like, yeah, too Christmas tree and juniper forward. So I love that you kind of take this as like a challenge when you're kind of doing these tastings and exposing people to new product.
100%. And in my heart, I am a playful bully. Like anytime someone's like, "I absolutely won't," I'm like, "I bet I could make you."
That's a good friend. That's the kind of friend you need for that positive reinforcement and encouragement when you're out. Even if you work the next day, you know, it's like you can do it. You can come out for another drink.
Right.
So we'll get into pairing this. Uh, you did the last one. You led with the last one. I'll lead this one then, just to be
Yes.
fair. So already, like I will say, like thinking about it before tasting it, and I don't know if the taste kind of will influence my pairing here, but like the idea of collaboration, and you know, I thought of like I recently watched Argento's opera, and you know, so Dario Argento is very like when you talk about Italian cinema, it's like he is like the king of Italian cinema and Italian horror and that and all that. And I think like opera was very much that, but he also started adopting some of the stuff that was going on in like in the West in the US with like the slasher genre. So people were like, "Oh, this plot is a little bit more conventional than a typical Argento film," or like the gore is over the top, where it was something that was like off camera or sleight of hand and was like suggested in previous films. So this whole idea of like culture collaboration and you know what happens when you have like global connection. And I think like when you watch opera, it's still very much Argento. It's very like Italian cinema, but you can see all those influences from what was going on in the 80s in the American slasher and that genre. So it makes me think of this collaboration where it's very much like at its core, it's still Kentucky, rye and bourbon, or in Indiana rye as well. But it's what we're familiar with in the US. But then you get these subtle influences that really make it something new and its own beast when you bring in the Indian single malt.
That is a really thoughtful take on it, and I love
Mhm.
that. My pairing for this one was ginger snaps, uh, keeping it in
Canadian
the
film?
werewolf genre. But my thought was taking something that was familiar and kind of twisting the genre a little bit, which is what I think we did here. Ginger snaps, of course, being traditional werewolf story told through the lens of teenage girl and what becoming a beast and growing up feels like. And then having this with like those notes of Indiana rye, which people have had, Kentucky bourbon, which people have had, and then kind of twisting what those flavors present as.
That's so well done. And I love how like there's a similar angle, right? What's like what's familiar. And I always kind of laugh because when people will ask, if I'm on a podcast, be like, oh, like how do you come up with pairings? And I'm like, I think like if you want to find an angle, there's always an angle. And where I went with it was more like, okay, there's like global connection, but like familiarity, and then how do you influence that with something from the outside? Where I loved how you did the same thing, but it's like this genre we're very familiar with, the werewolf genre, but this paralleling it with like the coming of age, and there's definitely the feminist lens that you can throw through there. And it's a Canadian film, which I adore. So I'm a huge fan of Ginger Snap. So I really love that you pulled that one out.
Cool. Like, no, this was when initially when you were like, we're gonna pick some pairings, I was like, I pair food all the time. I pair I pair beverages with fragrances frequently. This will be my
Yeah.
first time pairing with a movie, but this was fun.
Yeah, the idea of that, like we're constantly pairing all the time, and whether it's like for a drink menu at a restaurant or like an experience where you're out in the market and you're bridging these stories, and how you're going to curate your lineup, and like we're always doing it. So when you really want to find an angle, it's there. And then I always say, then you just tap into what you know, right? So like Ginger Snaps for you is this movie that comes to mind. Yeah, it has the werewolves, it's familiar, but it's definitely a unique take on the traditional werewolf movie. And I always think of like that one and Jennifer's Body, like those two just kind of like are kind of like in tandem in what they did, like with especially with the feminist lens. But I won't go too deep into our love for literature and all that stuff.
Let me also say, since you're mentioning like, okay, when I think of Ginger Snaps and Jennifer's Body, I think of them as a triad with the movie Teeth.
Teeth, such a good one. Oh man, I feel like that's one I have not paired that yet, actually, by the way. So I always think of like I've done this for like 4 or 5 years now, and I'm like I've done a lot of the movies that I enjoy, and I have not done Teeth. So when you see a teeth pairing come up, maybe I'll even use a Bardstown product and find the the
Hey.
angle that I'll make sure I shout you out and give you some credit. Um, Speaking of
Nice.
like our foundation and what we enjoy, like I know you have this immense love for horror and like werewolves. Like, do you remember? I used to ask again, what's your favorite horror movie? I think it's super like Scream. Like, what's your favorite scary movie, horror movie? But like I started realizing like maybe the most important is like sometimes like the first one you watched or the most memorable one that left an impression with you. Can you remember what kind of like lured you in, or like you know? Bit you per se, if we're gonna run with a werewolf
Okay.
analogy.
I've got two answers to this. I did not start off as a horror lover. I'm jumpy and I'm also an insomniac. So watching scary movies and then just being awake at night while everybody else is sleeping, not my favorite thing to do. But I have a couple of friends and they super loved horror, but specifically anything that had practical effects. And so
Hmm.
anytime that we were hanging out, it was practical effects all the time. And being able to sit there and watch with others, I was like, you know what? I do kind of like it's okay to be scared, and we're scared
Yeah.
together, and maybe we'll all be awake later. Um, but my first horror movie, dang, now I have like a split answer to this because I thought I had an
I'm
answer,
here
but
for
then I
all of
remembered
it.
something
Yeah,
else.
you run with it.
So I have two like horror movie moments when from when I was young, and both of them kind of played out the same way. One of them, which is not a horror, was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I remember being very young, watching it with my dad, him falling asleep, and at the end, where the judge is revealed to be a tune and that steamroller is going over him, like me as a kid, I just remember trying so hard to wake him up and being like, Father, please. So that was like, I feel like my first experience with horror because I was horrified. Um, but I think that the first one that I ever watched was Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Oh, that's an interesting. I never like. It's funny because even I have the most cliche story where it's like it was Halloween and I watched Michael Myers and Halloween and that completely like roped me in. But yeah, I need to hear how you ended up watching Killer Clowns from Outer Space because everyone has a story about how you were too young probably or like you ended up in a
Yes.
situation where you saw it. Yeah.
No, okay, yes, 100% too young and similar story. I feel like my dad and I were watching something. He fell asleep. The next movie that came on was Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And I am watching it, and then I get to the point where I realize, like, oh no, this is scary. And once again, being totally unable to wake him up, like him snoring and me just like small, like, please, where's the remote?
It's like the and I love our parents and I think you know it's different times, right? But like yeah, we all kind of joke and everyone I interview is like in and around the same age. It's like you have the same story. You're like, why was I watching this at such a young age? Or like dad just like, oops, like I fell asleep now. Like the next movie comes on and it's a free for all. You're just like, what the hell am I watching?
Right.
Dad, wake up! And now there's killer clowns and people are getting pied to death and it's a wild one.
That's so funny because I clearly remembered the Roger Rabbit, and then once I started telling it, I was like, you know what? This is not the first time this has happened to me.
But I like the Roger Rabbit because like that's a movie that stands out for me as well. Like I think there's a lot of like, and maybe it's just like the time um when all these movies were released and again our age, but it's like that was another one that I knew it was maybe a little bit too mature for me. Like I remember watching that with my parents too, and it just kind of being like yeah, like it was the rental and you know, I'm just in there for the ride and the odd time like you know, parenting 101 it's like yeah, okay, maybe close your eyes for this moment like just put the
Right.
guard up. But yeah, it's cool that I think there's so many movies that we group into like nostalgia that are not necessarily horror but still in the same camp if that makes any sense. So I kind of like that you started off with like Roger Rabbit and then it went into Killer Clowns. Both really
Totally.
really good ones.
I
Um
think another fun thing about being young and watching those movies that we were probably not old enough to witness is watching it again as an adult and being like, oh, okay, I get that joke now.
Well, that's like okay, like fittingly, like this shirt here, like People Under the Stairs. It's one of my favorite movies. And when I was growing up, the whole premise is that like, you know, it was this older guy, and he was intentionally supposed to be, he's from the projects, and he heard that this one house was super corrupt, but they had gold in it, and he like gets this younger kid who's like trying to like earn and like build his reputation. They're like, let's go break into that house. Like these people have been exploiting us for the longest time. We're gonna steal the gold and we're gonna take care of our families. And the little kid who goes in with him, his mom's sick and I think she's dying. So there's all these like mitigating factors that it leads up that they're gonna go like into the house and try to find this gold. And when I watched it, I was just like, oh, it was spooky. It was weird. Like you find out that like this couple had like kids trapped in the house, and they're like in the walls. And you know, one of the characters, Roach, doesn't have a tongue. They cut off his tongue. And as like saying it now, it even sounds like way more twisted and dark. But it was done in this a little bit of like a goofy angle. So you know, as a kid, I was like, I love People Under the Stairs. Like, it's such a great movie. And then I watched it later on. I love Wes Craven, but I'm like oh, this is about race and gentrification. And I was like, whoa. And it became one of my favorite movies for a whole different reason later on revisiting it. I think that's kind of like the beauty of going back to these films. It's like I was way too young to watch it, but at the same time, I was too young to even understand like some of the social commentary that was going on in the film in the first place.
So, okay, not about a movie, and I realize we're coming to the end of our time, but
Yeah.
that happened to me with Gone with the Wind. I remember reading that book in high school and thinking like, oh my gosh, Scarlett O'Hara, what a diva. Like she is taking control of this family. She's helping everybody, even if she is a little bit of a jerk sometimes. Then rereading it in college, and I was like, this is obviously about race relations in the South. Like what?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, you
it was
you
just like so funny to think about the version of me that was like, this is a powerful woman, and that's all I took away from it.
but and I think like like having a daughter now, it's very interesting because I mean she's 3, but even at such an early age, kind of just seeing this innocence, and I think a lot of us like we watch these movies still very like we haven't been tainted yet, or like there's innocence. Like, yeah, you're focused on like who's this woman as a character, or like me, I'm just like, oh my God, like these weird people have kids trapped in the house, and like you're rooting for like the 2 guys who broke into the house to escape, and you're like, whoa, there's like so much more layered here and going on, and I think that's super important that we come back to that and revisit it. So I'm glad that we kind of have these similar experiences. But yeah, even being an English major as well, things I've read in high school, and then going to school, doing an English major, and now teaching it because now I teach high school English.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, this is just my like my creative writing outlet that became somehow yeah a podcast and these other things. But this is a good segue again because I know you have this English background. I know you're a phenomenal writer. I know you wrote a lot even before getting into like bartending and whiskey. If you were writing something on Bardstown, whether it be a short piece or a poem, what are some of the like key words or themes that come to mind?
Ooh, great question.
Mhm.
Um, okay. I think I would really lean into the honesty of what we do. A thing that I didn't mention, but I probably should have, is that maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. Oh well. On the
I think
sides of
I
our
have it too.
bottles,
I'll see if mine will like
yeah, maybe.
maybe.
So
If you're
we're
listening,
always
we're like putting
putting,
our bottles up to the camera right now and
yeah,
trying to get
right.
a picture of the side of the label.
Yeah, we're always putting whether we made it or sourced it, how old it is, what the mash bill is, if it's a blend, what percentage of each mash bill went into that blend. And I think that we are trying so hard to let people know where flavor is coming from and not have any mystery surrounding what we're doing. Like if we are gonna play in the whiskey space, we want to be as honest and transparent as possible about it. Um, I think another theme that I would really lean on is curiosity and exploration. We, if there's a way to play with flavor, then we are not afraid to do that. And one, we have the technology to control so many variables and to track so many variables in distillation. But two, we just kind of have that drive as well to be like, all right, we know what whiskey has been, what
Mhm.
can bourbon be? And and staying within those guidelines of what the laws are, but still kind of trying to play around with like, all right, if we tweak this, if we distill with this grain, what can it be? What can it taste like? Um, man, and then I think that the other thing that I would lean on is the inclusion, if that makes sense. Like I've mentioned it before, but I it's always something that I think about. Bardstown could have picked anybody to publicly represent them in the whiskey sphere, and it's very traditionally a white man's space, or at the very least, like an older man's space.
Definitely.
And they picked a biracial woman.
Yeah.
Um, and then once they picked me, they introduced me to Tracy Franklin, who was one of the first ever Black brand ambassadors for Scotch, because they told me that they could teach me marketing and public speaking and about the whiskey making process, but they didn't know what it would be like to walk into a room and have people assume that you weren't the authority, or to be a minority
Mhm.
in a whiskey space as both a woman and a Black person. So they were really thoughtful about like giving me a support system to be like, you're going to face things that we don't even know to think about, but we want to make sure that you have somebody to talk to about this. Um, so yeah, when I think about my experience, like it's I don't know, I feel really lucky that I'm in this position to always be learning. Like I'm never the smartest person in the room, and that's kind of a privilege to be around experts all the time. So I
I
don't
would
know.
I would probably argue that one though, but
Well,
I because
I'm
I'm just
smart in
rooting
some
for you.
ways. Thanks.
Yeah. But no, I think like it's super important because I think sometimes we forget like I think, the whiskey community is great online. I love it, like all the people I've connected with. But I also realize that it is very much still a bubble, that the mass market is not necessarily this like super welcoming and inclusive like whiskey community. So it is a big statement to say, yeah, you know what, we're not going to go with like a white older man to be representative of the brand because I feel like it's very like an easy cop out. I'm sure they could find some people who know bourbon or whiskey. Um, but like having a woman, a biracial woman, and someone who just like brings so much more to the table, like yourself, like even the fact that like we connected over like, yes, like you are knowledgeable about whiskey, that's amazing. But just like that, you can tell me about these amazing like Detroit parties and your love for horror and all these other arts and cultural things and your love for literature. I'm like, that's what someone's going to leave with when you meet someone out in the market or doing an experience or tasting. I feel like that's the impression. The whiskey's great. The whiskey, like Bardstown, I think it speaks for itself. But if you're going to create a connection, it's going to come down to like that person behind it, and you don't need just a figurehead who's like spitting off the PDF fact sheets. You need someone like yourself, Jazz, who's going to make it a memorable experience.
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
And like even for me to do this tonight, like it's been awesome. And just being able to connect with you. And like I said, like for those who are listening, we've never really chatted before this. Like it was just quick, like, hey, you love like whiskey and horror, like let's do this. And we made it happen. And I feel like I would do this again with you, not recording and hang out and have drinks. And one day I will come down there and I will like make it to that library as well because it's epic.
Yes.
And I need to make it to
Please.
Bardstown.
I would
Um,
say if you are ever in Kentucky, please let me know. I would love to show you the distillery or the Louisville downtown tasting room.
yeah.
Um, and in the meantime, I know that we are going to be chatting because this was great. No, I totally agree. Like this is really natural, super fun, and I'm glad that we had so much in common.
Before we take off, where can people find you? Because I think it's super important that people figure out where you're at online and how they can connect with you.
Totally. So I am jazz.distilled on Instagram, JAZ period distilled. And that essentially covers all my travel and activities. If you DM me, I will answer. And you can follow Bardstown at Bardstown Bourbon Co. On Instagram. And you can follow our master blender and VP of new product development, Dan Calloway, at
Mm.
Danny Bardstown, which super exciting. Just this Sunday, he was on 60 Minutes talking about like the barrel aging process. So kind of neat. And his Instagram has had like all the behind the scenes for that, which has been cool to witness.
It's funny. Yesterday, my dad was over and he's like, "Oh, do you have any episodes coming up?" And I said, "Yeah, it's with like Bardstown." And he's like, "Oh, like I don't really know." I'm like, "Listen, Dad, they were on 60 Minutes, all right?" And like for him, that's like a reference point. He's like, "Whoa, okay, like that. They're doing really well then if they're on
He's
60
like, this is
Minutes."
a big deal.
Yeah. I had to say it was 60 Minutes related in order for him to take it very serious, but that was the selling point. All right, Jess, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you, and thank you for all for listening. Again, remember to like, subscribe, and most importantly, stay spooky. Cheers.